Hello and welcome to another episode of South Asia Chat, brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Archana Atmakuri. Over the past few months, there has been an exponential increase in our dependence on technology and social media. To discuss the impact of COVID on technology and the challenges that come with me is Dr. Anuradha Rao, the founder of CyberCognizanz, a training and communications company in Singapore that focuses on cyber safety and cybersecurity. For over 11 years, she has studied, taught, and conducted research on the relationship between new technologies, society, politics, and security in Asia at NUS and other higher education institutions in Singapore. Welcome, Dr. Anuradha Rao.
Thank you, Archana.
So tell us how COVID-19 has impacted the way we use social media.
Well, Archana, with regard to the internet and social media, we see that they have played such a huge role during this crisis, keeping people and communities informed and connected. And as social media mirrors real life, it is now reflecting the realities of life in this phase of the new normal. So people continue to take to social media to show how they are coping and how life is being lived under COVID-19, where work from home and home-based learning, these are the new acronyms and these are the new realities. And in this, what we see is there's this sense of a shared reality, a global connection, if you will. Whether you're a celebrity, a leader, an ordinary person, rich or poor, everyone is sharing the same kind of reality. And this has never happened before. And it's very interesting to watch how this is playing out on social media. And as we see that the pandemic extends for longer than anticipated, there's greater emphasis on help and supporting one another online. So we see people are offering free professional services. We've seen counselors and coaches offering free services. We've seen people in recruitment helping others who have lost their jobs. And this is not just in, say, restricted to one geographical location. People in different parts of the world, and of course, this is all due to the internet, are able to help each other in an entirely different sort of socio-cultural setting. And that's something that's really heartening to see.
There are also some of the things that we have to be worried about. I mean, there are some dangers of using social media. Could you tell us more about the challenges that come with higher dependence on social media due to all the aspects you've mentioned?
Right. Well, we have the usual suspects, increase in cybercrime. We also have an increase in fake news and misinformation, which sort of we can talk about also. But I just wanted to raise the issue of something else that's been quite problematic, which has been the issue of doxing. And so doxing, just very quickly, is the practice of revealing people's private information, such as their location, their photos, contact details. And we've even seen in the case of Singapore last year, even releasing details of people's immigration status. Mm-hmm. And now, once this is done on social media with an intent to shame or embarrass others, it becomes a sort of vigilantism. And we've seen this behavior happen across different places, different countries. And there's definitely this fine line between raising public awareness of an issue and public shaming. And so in India, we've seen over the last few months several incidents of doxing, even though I think the term isn't something that people quite understand yet, but the behavior is something that's very representative of doxing. We saw disturbing behavior happening with airline crew and healthcare professionals at their places of residence. Yeah. And when, of course, we understand that people are concerned about the spread of the coronavirus, we shouldn't be treating everyone as a potential criminal, and we shouldn't be harassing our fellow netizens or citizens. And it really does disservice to first responders and even professionals who are on the front lines. So I think doxing is something that governments and citizens have to start taking a little more seriously. In Singapore, we've seen this where you have people that don't wear masks or people who are violating social distancing norms have often been at the receiving end of quite a lot of online harassment when their information is leaked online. And we have to remember that though we do have access to the internet and social media, how are we using it? Do we really need to spend that much of time harassing others? Can we use our time on the internet in a more productive manner? And I think that is something that people don't stop to think about often enough. And in Singapore, doxing is a punishable offense. In India, there is no specific law against doxing. It's subsumed under different provisions of, say, the IT Act or the Indian Penal Code. But there is definitely a need to address this, along with other worrying aspects of online behavior separately and quickly.
So you've mentioned about fake news and misinformation. I think like it's one of the most important or emerging problems uh, that is consuming a lot of time across the globe of researchers and other government officials as well. Do you see any trends or like types of misinformation that we are seeing, say, in Singapore or in India for that matter?
Mm-hmm. That's right, Archana. I mean, as with every major event over the last few years, we have fake news and misinformation spreading like wildfire along with every other phenomenon. And with COVID-19, we see that fake news is outpacing the spread of the disease itself. I mean, you've done work on this where it's been called an infodemic, and we can sort of discern some broad categories of fake news, and some of them are in relation to cures for COVID-19 or the types of foods and diets that can prevent people from contracting the virus easily. And we've had things as seemingly innocent suggestions such as herbal and Ayurvedic cures to some things that are more outlandish, such as cow dung and cow urine. And while it appears that they may not be as harmful as we think, the truth is that they can cause a lot of harm, because either they can prevent people from actually seeking the correct type of treatment. Another unintended consequence is just from falling sick from taking these cures, supposed cures that have no medical relevance whatsoever. So there are sort of dangers within sort of these seemingly innocent types of fake news that are circulating. And then you have the more obvious types of fake news that are clearly there to cause different types of societal problems. So we have communal rumors that were spreading in India, and especially in January and February, we saw that there was a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment that spread along with fake news, and this resulted in a lot of blatantly racist and discriminatory behavior against people from Northeast India or people of Northeast Indian origin. And you see a little more recently in April, fact checkers have also pointed out an increase in rumors about Muslims deliberately spreading the disease. And now we see that many of these pieces of information have started taking on a communal overtone. And this we know is an extremely dangerous route to go down. And that's something that we all have to be a little more wary of. In Singapore, there has been fake news that the government regularly debunks, and recently has been about migrant workers. And such information, again, has the potential to cause societal unrest. And this is why governments and citizens just cannot afford to leave fake news unattended.
So then, how are countries dealing with this? Are there any initiatives? I mean, we've seen in Singapore, but in India or other South Asian countries or Sri Lanka?
I think, yes, Singapore, you mentioned it, it really did take the lead by creating the gov.sg WhatsApp group. And that's a model that I think several other countries have built upon. And India has done the same thing as well. And I think India, having had the elections, general elections last year, has already had the experience of dealing with alarming rise in fake news. And so it's a sort of built on this experience from last year to put into place better mechanisms this year to combat the fake news surrounding COVID-19. And in fact, the rise of fake news has been addressed by Prime Minister Modi himself, where he has directly appealed to citizens to not fall prey to rumors. So we see what an important issue this has become. And so in India, governments have used various social media channels for information updates and to counter fake news, such as official WhatsApp and Telegram groups. And we see that technology companies have really started to put more energy and effort and resources into combating fake news. And they've often been criticized for sort of doing this as something that is thought about at a later stage. But I think the mechanisms that have been, again, used for the elections last year have kicked in pretty well in this case. And so you have WhatsApp that teamed up with the government of India to launch chatbots that share authentic information and do their own version of busting myths. You have other companies like TikTok that are also working overtime to remove false and misleading content, false images, false advertisement from their platforms. But this is a huge task just with the sheer amount of misinformation swirling around. And so you definitely need other players from civil society to come in to participate. And in India, fact checkers have been doing this for the last few years, debunking fake news. And they've been already able to develop synergies with mainstream media and technology companies. And they continue to play an important role in debunking fake news. But the interesting thing is we also have other actors that are joining in. And in this case, we have health professionals, we have collectives of scientists that have also volunteered to fight fake news. And so I think that we've sort of, in India, we're moving to understand it as a full whole of society approach that's needed to combat fake news. And just, I think we have to understand on an individual level. I mean, we can't have governments and companies and everyone else doing the hard work for us on an individual level. We need to stop and think before we consume any piece of information online. Or a couple of things to think about: who are the actors and motives behind fake news? What do they stand to gain from spreading this kind of misinformation? And use our own critical thinking capabilities to avoid sort of making this infodemic even worse than it already is.
Going back to the phenomenon of doxing that you've mentioned, as countries are moving towards having an exit strategy, one of the common trends that we've seen across is having contract tracing apps in place. Mm-hmm. And then like the challenge that comes is like data privacy. Could you tell us more about these kind of challenges that come with the contract tracing apps?
Right. I mean, this whole privacy versus security debate, Archana, I mean, for those of us who've been studying technologies, we've seen that this is not a new debate. It's a case for each new technology that comes up and in the sphere of surveillance versus safety versus privacy. We've seen it in terms of debate regarding CCTV cameras, which are sort of taken for granted across every country now. And we have the same issue that's arising in relation to facial recognition technologies. We recently had the Indian government say that they used facial recognition technologies to identify the Delhi riot perpetrators. So there's always this question of safety and security versus privacy. How much of infringement of privacy is too much? Traditionally in India, the Supreme Court has stepped in to protect privacy of citizens. Mm-hmm. But in the name of national security, we do know that certain powers are vested with the government, and these are extraordinary times. And tracing apps and other invasive technologies are important for emergencies, for law and order, for safety and security. So I think it's important for us to consider the context within which we are currently living in, within which governments are operating, which is unprecedented. And as long as there are adequate safeguards in place for privacy, and I think both Singapore's Trace Together app and India's Arogya Setu seem to have put in place reasonable safeguards for privacy at this point of time. So for me at this point, it does not seem to be such a huge concern because there seem to be some safeguards in place, but we do need to check a few things before embracing such technologies. For instance, for an ordinary citizen, something to consider is, do you really need to download and use it if you, say, are not stepping out of your home? So these are some considerations. If it's not mandatory, do we really need to download it? If we have downloaded it, should we stop to think about what the government is going to do with this information? How secure is it? When will the data be deleted? That's important. A couple of other things is, it can only be effective, these apps can only be effective if a certain number of people in the population use it. And
Right.
we've seen that even with Trace Together, it hasn't really had that much of an uptake. And so the government is trying to sort of move on to the next level of getting people to register themselves in places that they enter. So they can only be effective up to a certain limit. But for me, what is worrying beyond COVID-19 is that while as an ordinary citizen, it may not be a big issue, it is undoubtedly a concern for individuals who may be targeted in the future for activities that governments consider quote unquote anti-national, whatever this may mean. So if I think about the Pegasus spying scandal late last year, that's just something that in my mind is one aspect that is worrying about invasive technologies. And beyond COVID, this is something that lawyers, policy experts, civil society have to weigh in with the government to see the benefits and limitations in the long run.
Before we let you go, could you tell our listeners one thing that they have to be mindful of while using social media going forward?
I think the most important thing is to think before they share, to think before they post. And I would say what I would teach my students always is to think ethically, which is do no harm. So when you're sending any piece of information, if it has a potential to cause harm, just don't send it. Put it aside, think over it for a short period of time. If you really need to send it after that, go ahead. If not, please move on to the next thing.
Okay, on that note, thank you for speaking with us, Dr. Anuradha Rao. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Archana.
Dear listeners, we hope you enjoyed the conversation. To know more about our work, please visit our website www.isas.nus.edu.sg. Thank you.